Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Discourse Education Podcast. My name is Chang. I'm the general paper, H2 History, and English tutor here at the Discourse Education. So yeah, we missed the episode last week because we were busy, doing some marketing things, right? The free workshop and all that, and certainly swamped with, a whole bunch of other business operation stuff, yada yada. I won't bore you with the details, but we're back this week with our regular, weekly episode, and yeah, we are gonna be talking about a couple of really, oh boy, big stuff this week, all right? So here's how the show is gonna go. We are gonna be talking first about, the US intentions to ban TikTok, right? Effectively, right? I mean, technically speaking, it's not a ban outright, but yes, okay. And secondly, the fact that in Singapore, our opposition leader, Mr. Pritam Singh, was recently charged for lying to Parliament. So we're gonna be talking about those two, alright? And we're gonna break down the details and explain how you can use it in your GP essays or even AQ, alright? And even for EL argumentative essays. Yeah, but anyway, it's I guess pretty good week. Just caught Dune 2 yesterday. Lots of fun. Great cinematography, great directing, incredible acting and sound design, and the music is chef's kiss. But I didn't like it as much as I anticipated. But hey, we are not here to talk about films, right? Just a little bit of banter here before we get started on the main topics. But yeah, I would say though, Dune 2, if you could, right, if you have the chance, go and catch it on IMAX, right, in the biggest screen available, or Dolby Atmos, because they are equally, potent in terms of the technology to really bring out, the essence of the film in itself. So yeah, if you haven't seen it, go and catch Dune 2, right? And if you haven't seen the first one, it's on Netflix. Go check it out. It's pretty great. So yeah. Alright, so without further ado, this is the first thing that we're going to be talking about today. Why has the US passed a bill to ban TikTok and what's next, so on and so forth. This came out on Al Jazeera, last week, 7 days ago. So obviously this news is not technically from, the previous week, right, as is the norm with our podcast here, because we typically try and cover current affairs that came out in the week prior, all right? But at the same time, sometimes some news are just that big that we need to sort of talk more about it. And so in case you haven't heard, right, the US Congress as a whole, essentially, right, or to be more specific, the House of Representatives. So in case you are not sure about how the US Congress is structured, right, you essentially have to think about it in this way. Congress is the legislative branch of US's federal government, and Congress in itself is split into the House of Representatives and the Senate. So where the laws are drafted, they are called bills, right? They are typically drafted in the House of Representatives. So any sort of federal level kinds of legislative sort of thing, right? Any of those processes. I mean, of course, the House of Representatives do other things as well, but when it comes to the drafting of laws, it always begins with the House of Representatives. So yeah, so it says here in this Al Jazeera article, right, that essentially the House of Representatives passed a bill that called for the app's Chinese developer ByteDance or Douyin, right, to divest from the company, which means, remove themselves or remove their own interests from that company or be booted out of US app stores. And apparently, yes, it received overwhelming bipartisan support. Now, according to this article, right, what it says is that the biggest fear, I guess, is the fears of, the Chinese government, okay, so the CCP, having a whole lot of control, over TikTok in itself, given that TikTok is owned by a Chinese company, and that, they could possibly use it to, secure some of the whatever, I guess, sensitive materials or information, all right, because it's such a huge social media app in USA at the moment, and that may compromise USA's national security. Now, of course, you have all seen those meme videos of, the TikTok CEO Qiu Shouzi, right, talking to that how shall I put it, not too bright Senator Tom Cotton, saying things like, yes, I'm Singaporean, no, Senator, I'm Singaporean, I'm not part of the CCP, blah 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 blah, so you have seen all those memes, certainly, and it was a huge thing in Singapore because everyone was going like, hey, he name dropped our country, wow, cool beats, right? But yeah, essentially that's the main cause, I guess, of why this particular bill was introduced in the first place. And of course, this article also mentioned that critics pointed out that Qiu Shouzi, in his hearing, a couple of months ago, he didn't strike a good impression, right? And the critics blamed it partly on the fact that there was a lot of grandstanding by legislatures. So what that means is they would come up and make big political gestures, right, and point out like, hey, you are part of the CCP, like Tom Cotton did. Okay, so it says here too, right, the CEO was grilled on whether he supports the Chinese Communist Party in scenes reminiscent of the US Red Scare of the 1950s. Okay, so in case you're not sure what this means, right, in the 1950s, to be more specific, 1950, there was this old senator called Joseph McCarthy, right? So for H2 history students, y'all should know about this. He started this thing, okay, so this is how it looks like, all right, if you look at the screen here. He essentially accused, US, the executive branch, right, which was led by Truman back then, of having communists in his cabinet. That means his staff is made of communists, right? That movement came to be known as McCarthyism. Essentially a lot of accusations, political grandstandings with not one shred or iota of evidence to suggest as such. If that sounds familiar, it is, well, that's is unfortunately the state of things in the world today, right? So what Al Jazeera is trying to do here was to draw a comparison between the grilling of Qiu Shouzi and, what Joseph McCarthy did to Truman and, the Democratic Party back then. And surprise, surprise, yes, McCarthy was Republican. Okay, so yeah, that's the gist of this article, I guess, right? Obviously, this bill is still currently a bill. It has not gone, or rather, it has not been confirmed as a legislation yet. It still has to go through the Senate. And of course, it still has to be approved by the president. Although Joe Biden, he has said that yes, if this gets through Congress as a whole, I will sign it into law. Right? That's what he said. And that's the gist of this particular article here. Now, a couple of perspectives I guess we need to take from this whole thing. It may sound, or at least it may look as if that the USA was, specifically targeting China as a whole. All right, and just to be clear, I'm not taking any sides here in this foreign policy kind of competition. But what we need to understand is, the surrounding contexts behind why the USA might be behaving in this way and why Joe Biden has such a I guess almost hawkish kind of approach to US foreign policy, in relation to China, right? So the thing is that the US and China now at this moment is, and I guess with the rest of the Western world too, is pretty much locked in a very, very fierce economic competition kind of situation, right? And what we need to understand again, as with all our other topics, we often bring in a lot of historical context because, right, I mean, setting aside the fact that I'm biased as a history teacher myself, but also all these historical contexts is, they are important in helping you understand like what's actually happening at the moment and why nations would behave in the way that they behave. So as we know, China is the second largest economy in the world, right? And the thing is that they experience the economic growth through, or rather, they experience this phenomenal growth in a very short period of time, relatively speaking, because when China first opened up, that was in 1978, right? So for the H2 history students, y'all will learn about this eventually, when you study the economic history of China and how Deng Xiaoping came in and implemented a variety of reforms, right, that opened China up to the rest of the world. And so from that point of time, it simply took them, I guess, 50, half a century, right, to get where they are today. So for China, their economic development in the past few decades were predicated on a few things, right? Number one, obviously increasing levels of education. Number two, lots and lots of infrastructural development. So if you visit China today, right, as a tourist, you will see that it has, wow, this huge amounts of infrastructural development and all that, okay? And mega cities and all, even cities like Chongqing is freaking amazing, all these projects that they implemented there. But at the same time, right, because of this phenomenal economic growth, right, they can no longer leverage on being the sort of like factory of the world, because of the fact that costs of production in China are no longer the cheapest as they were in the past when they were first rising up, right? So any goods and services that are manufactured in China nowadays may not necessarily be the cheapest, in short, right? So yeah, that's one, right? So China leveraged infrastructural development and manufacturing, and of course they also went into technology, right? TikTok, okay, to sort of boost their economic growth. But the reason why the West, and again, I'm not trying to take any sides here, but the reason why the West simply do not trust China as much really stems from their accusations, right? I am not saying that this is confirmed, okay? Certainly has not been confirmed by the Chinese government, and they often push back on it. But the Western nations often accuse China of intellectual property theft, right? So that's why for a while there were, I guess for Gen Z viewers or Gen Alpha viewers, right? You may not necessarily remember this, but when I was a kid, teenager, there were a lot of memes going around of Chinese counterfeit products and all that. Fair or unfair, I'm not here to comment on that, okay? But yeah, those were the accusations, right, that were put forward by the Western nations against the Chinese government. That's number one. So that lack of trust is already sort of embedded in the sort of economic relationship that the Western nations have with China, right? And that in itself bleeds into this particular thing. So because of that distrust, that's why they have fears, right? Whether it's founded or unfounded. Okay, we are still in the process of determining that. But they fear that TikTok could possibly be used as a platform, to sort of like, I guess, mine information or get some sort of leverage over the Western nations, and that would in turn compromise, or specifically for the US in this case, because again, we are talking about USA right here, right? But get information that may possibly compromise their national security. All right, so that's why you have this law that's being drafted at the moment. Again, whether it's fair, I don't really have a comment on that. That's way above my pay grade, and I don't really want to make any assessments without having the sort of like proper insights or information that obviously both sides would not divulge fully. Maybe in a couple of hundreds of years, when historians have the benefit of hindsight and they can understand the dynamics of this relationship within this current political and global economic context, then they may make an assessment. But at the moment right now, we can only set in store by whatever facts and information that we have on hand. And the fact of the matter is that TikTok is being planning to be banned unless ByteDance, right, divests its ownership of that app in USA. Now, let's move on to the, I guess, a whiteboard here. When I say it's a whiteboard, it's really just Microsoft Word, right? Couple of ways, as I said earlier, to assess this. Really, what are the causes? Okay, the main cause, I think, really stems from the Western nations' distrust of the Chinese, okay, because of accusations of due to accusations of IP theft, intellectual property theft. All right, again, whether or not that's true, we are not here to assess that. We are just, the fact of the matter is that Western nations do not trust China because of this, right? And I mean, let's just be real. At the same time, also, it stems from economic interests from the Western nations, right? Because who's the number one economy in the world? USA. Who's the number two economy in the world? China. USA having enjoyed that privileged position for the past, for more than the past century, I guess, or even longer than that. Obviously, they don't really want to relinquish this position as much as they could help it, and this might be part of that. But again, I don't really want to encourage any sort of conspiracy theories on that front. All right, but of course, what's more important to understand here would be the impacts of it. So from an economic standpoint, right, obviously a lot of companies in the US specifically rely on TikTok as a platform for marketing, right? And so we are looking at it really from a microeconomic standpoint, right? So business activities impacted because of due to the usage of TikTok as a marketing channel, right? And then of course some other things that we can talk about here, right? The as much as I hate to admit this, the influencer economy as a whole will be affected as well, because many of your modern day influencers, I guess, leverage on TikTok, and all these shorts to create content and thereafter garner a lot of followers. So should TikTok be banned, right? Assuming that it is banned in the US, that obviously impacts their livelihoods. So in which case I'll say go and get a real job. But yeah, I'm not gonna comment more than that, right? Except for the fact that they will be affected. And aside from that, we are also talking about real tangible impacts because we are talking about job losses. Aside from the influencer economy, don't really want to comment more on that, but job losses in terms of your, tax, right? Your marketing personnel or whoever that may be employed by TikTok in one form or another, and also all the sort of business relationships between that may possibly have been forged between TikTok and all your other big companies, because once again leveraging TikTok as a marketing channel, right? And okay, this is just a sidetrack, but don't you find it weird that Joe Biden said he would sign this bill, and then afterwards, in a bid to get more votes from the Gen Z voters, he signed on to TikTok like a couple of months ago? Yeah, well, anyway. Yeah, of course, from the other side of other perspectives, right? So cultural perspective. Okay, obviously the sort of like influencer culture, I guess, would be affected. Again, whether or not that's a good thing, I'll leave that up to your own personal opinion, right? Personally, I think it's great, but whatever. Okay, which that reminds me also, in terms of other economic impacts, what that also means is that your other social media companies or social media platforms, yeah, what other platforms are there? I guess aside from maybe Snapchat, or if we are talking about it in the context of USA, right? Or God forbid, Facebook and Instagram, both of which are owned by the same damn company. So, again, lack of availability of substitutes, right? Now, from an economic standpoint, or microeconomic analysis standpoint, you all may say that, this affects consumer utility, I guess. But what we are talking about here really is the change in the market structure and how that may be potentially highly disruptive. Because what other social media platforms are there? I mean, I guess you can say YouTube and YouTube Shorts, but even then, right? Snapchat, I don't think it can compete with those other platforms that I mentioned previously, and TikTok is the only one. So at the moment, we have effectively an oligopolistic competition structure, right? And the removal of TikTok, then it just becomes a duopoly essentially. Okay, unless some startup comes up and, I don't know, comes up with some other alternatives, right? Obviously, we can't really consider Truth Social as an alternative because it's a joke. And there's Vero, yeah, Vero, the one that Zack Snyder uses, but those companies are obviously not as huge, and you don't want Truth Social to be that big anyway. So yeah, those are the possible impacts. All right. In terms of how we can use this particular example for GP questions, perhaps for questions like these, something like that. All right. To what extent should nations do anything that is necessary to secure their own interests? Okay, because there's one other impact that I didn't talk about, which we really should. All right, foreign policy side of things, or to be more accurate, international relations. Well, to put it simply, US-China ties will be affected, obviously, right? Because TikTok is a Chinese-owned company, right? It's a private company, sure, but the government would certainly have an interest in the well-being of that particular company and how well it's doing. So if TikTok is banned from USA, then yeah, this is gonna hurt it a lot. And of course, we need to consider all the ongoing context or the contexts from the past several years, things like your US-China trade wars, right? So it will only exacerbate those tensions, and not to mention all the political sort of clashes that have been occurring as a result of things like Israel and Hamas and whole other bunch of issues, right? Russia and Ukraine war, for instance. So geopolitical interests meshing with economic interests, and how that in turn would impact the overall international relations between the USA and China. So over here, again, we are not sure what the actual outcome would be in terms of whether or not TikTok will be banned, but I guess if you want to use this example for questions like these, right? Because all these questions, or rather this example will most likely be most suitable for questions on the economy and questions on international relations. Okay, so if let's say we want to use it in from the perspective of international relations, I would use this example as perhaps a counter argument, right? Because banning it seems a bit drastic given all the potential impacts that could occur. But once again, the lawmakers there, they are sort of they did a CBA, cost benefit analysis, and they realized, hey, the threat to national security interests might be higher. And again, obviously I'm not in the US cabinet, and I certainly wouldn't want to be, because I mean, just look at what's happening in the USA now in terms of their political situation, and yeah, who wants to do that job, right? Yeah, so I would use it as a counter argument, right, in the context of this question. Okay, now the short of it at the end of the day for this particular topic is that we should ultimately consider the kinds of potential economic impacts and international relations impacts, and you can also see, once again, as I said earlier, how political interests will often mesh with economic ones. All right, so yeah, I guess that's that for this topic. Now that we're done with that, we're gonna move on to the next one. So thanks for watching. All right, if you would like to ask us a question, you can submit a question using this link down here. Okay, and of course follow us on our socials, right? We post snippets of our podcast episodes on TikTok, although I don't know how long that's gonna last, depending on the news that we discussed. Also follow us on Instagram. That's where you get behind the scenes looks at our classes, how we conduct our lessons, our students, and the funny things that they do in class, right? And by funny, I mean positive funny, okay? And of course, if you are looking for more help, in your O-levels or A-levels journey, right? For the subjects of English language, general paper, and H2 history, please contact us, right? Using the contact details that can be found on our website. Okay, so yeah, you can see our website link there, all right, and submit a question using this last link here at https, right, / the discourseeducation.com.sg / discourse education podcast. All right, so discourse education podcast. All right, and yeah, we have also recently expanded into primary school tuition, right? Teaching young kids English. It's a challenge for me, because I don't know how to handle kids, but it's great for personal growth. And yeah, if you are looking for a tuition on those subjects, please feel free to contact us anytime. All right. So with that down, and yeah, thanks for watching today, and I will see you guys next week. Have a good one.